Okay, picture this. It's 2 a.m., January 3rd, 2026. You've got these low-flying U.S. helicopters slicing through the dark, just 100 feet above the ocean, totally invisible to radar. Their target? The residence of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, right in the heart of a blacked-out Caracas. Now, this isn't some Hollywood action movie script. Nope. This is a detailed, hypothetical military scenario, and we're going to break down exactly how it unfolds and what it could mean for the world.
Now, before we dive any deeper, I have to make something super clear. What we're about to explore is a hypothetical scenario. It comes straight from our source material, but these events have not actually happened. Think of it more like a thought experiment, really, a narrative that's been built to ask some very, very difficult questions about power, about resources, and about international law.
So, how would an operation of this magnitude actually play out? Well, the scenario from January 2026 lays out a pretty shocking timeline. I mean, the speed and precision here are just stunning. Within a single minute of arrival, the compound is breached. Just 5 minutes after that, the commandos have their target. President Maduro is supposedly woken from his sleep, captured, and then airlifted right out of his own country before the city even knows what's hit them. This quote, which the source attributes to President Trump in the scenario, paints a really chilling picture of detachment. Watching this whole raid unfold just like it's a TV show. It's a shocking image, and it forces us to ask the central question of this entire explainer: why would an operation like this ever be launched in the first place?
Well, the scenario provides an official reason, right? A justification that would be presented to the world, that this was not an act of war, but actually a law enforcement action against a major drug trafficker. So the legal groundwork for this, according to the source, is a real indictment from the Southern District of New York, and the charges are incredibly serious. We're talking accusations that Maduro personally ran a narco-terrorism operation for decades. That's the official story. But as the source points out, the official story, well, it has some pretty big holes in it. Take a look at these numbers from the source. They highlight a major inconsistency. The U.S. indictment claims Venezuela ships about 250 metric tons of cocaine a year. But look at Guatemala. Back in 2018, it was estimated to have moved 1,400 metric tons. That's way, way more. So if the whole point was to stop cocaine, why was Venezuela the target?
And there's another disconnect here. The source highlights that the leading cause of overdose deaths in the United States isn't even cocaine, it's fentanyl. And that fentanyl primarily comes from Mexico, made with chemicals from China. Venezuela is said to have no known role in the fentanyl trade at all. All of this leads the source to suggest a completely different motive.
So let's move on to the alternative motive the source presents. And it all hinges on one single, massive resource that has pretty much defined Venezuela's history for a century.
303 billion. That is the number of barrels of proven crude oil reserves just sitting under Venezuelan soil. And to be clear, it's not just a lot of oil. According to the source, it is the largest proven reserve on planet Earth.
And to really put that in perspective, Venezuela holds more proven oil reserves than Saudi Arabia, more than Canada, more than Iran. It accounts for almost a fifth of the entire world's known supply. It's a staggering amount.
According to the source, the tension over this oil is absolutely nothing new. After decades of American companies operating in Venezuela, things changed dramatically when Hugo Chavez came to power and fully nationalized the industry, basically kicking those companies out. The source claims this led to a US-backed coup attempt and then years of escalating sanctions.
And this quote, this is what's presented as the smoking gun. The day after the hypothetical raid, Trump supposedly doesn't talk about drugs at all. He allegedly calls Venezuela's nationalization of its own resources the greatest theft in the history of America. For the source, this one statement just blows the lid off the whole thing and reveals the true motivation behind the entire operation.
Okay, so if oil was the real motive, the source argues this operation wasn't just controversial, it would have been a flagrant violation of both international and U.S. domestic law. See, at the very heart of international law is the United Nations Charter. And Article 2.4 is crystal clear. You cannot use military force against another sovereign nation, period. An armed raid to kidnap another country's head of state is presented as a textbook violation of this principle. It doesn't get much clearer than that.
But the source argues the problem isn't just international. The U.S. Constitution gives the power to declare war to Congress, not to the president alone. In this whole scenario, the president acts unilaterally, completely on their own, without seeking any kind of approval from lawmakers. That would violate American law itself. So how does the administration in this scenario justify all this? By claiming it wasn't a war at all. They try to label it a law enforcement function. But the source poses a really critical question.
Does the force they used look anything like a law enforcement action to you?
Yeah, the sheer scale of the operation really speaks for itself, doesn't it? We're talking over 150 aircraft from 20 different bases, a cyber attack that knocks out power to an entire city, airstrikes that take out their radar and air defense systems, and all of it resulting in 40 casualties. The source argues that calling this law enforcement is a huge stretch, designed to bypass all the legal rules about waging an actual war.
Finally, let's just zoom out, because the source argues the consequences of an action like this would ripple far beyond just Venezuela and the United States. It could potentially reshape the entire global order as we know it. In the scenario, the international reaction is swift and it is severe. And it's not just rivals like China and Russia condemning the action. It's allies and neighbors in Latin America and Europe issuing these statements of deep concern. The head of the UN calls it a clear violation of its founding charter.
So here's the crucial point. This isn't just about Venezuela. It's about the very idea of a rules-based international order. The source argues that if the world's most powerful country can just ignore the rules whenever it wants, then, well, the rules effectively cease to exist for anyone. It just becomes might makes right.
And that's really the final, provocative question the source leaves us chewing on. In a world where military power becomes the ultimate arbiter, what happens to the idea of sovereignty? What happens to international law? And, what does that mean for every other nation just trying to find its way in the world?